it's mind-blowing to me, mind-blowing that they're going to have this massive celebration, this one big circle jerk of praise and worship, and they're calling it Jubilee while ignoring what Jubilee actually is, right? They want, and I posted this morning, MAGA wants the aesthetics of Jubilee without the economics of Jubilee. And that is the modern Christianity in a nutshell. Hey friends, welcome back to the Reason Reality Podcast. My name is Joe Smith. I'm your host. Today I have Dr. Jen Johannsen. Jen and I, we know each other for quite some time now, like a good year or more, if I think about it, right?
I think I did your Shift Happens pod like around this time last year, which is wild. Yeah. We've been in the trenches doing this stuff together for like a year now. I want to say it was June. So yeah,
I think that's true. Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. Time literally has like zero meaning right now because it feels like it's the longest year ever and it's now almost June.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So yes. But it's so good to sit down and catch up with you. And I'm excited for this conversation for people to learn about you and your work if they don't know yet. So before we get into anything else, for people who don't know you yet, how do you explain what you actually do without sounding like a LinkedIn bio?
I joke that I'm a dentist turned trauma-informed political consultant.
That's fair.
But I work with a bunch of unbought progressive congressional candidates who do not take corporate PAC money, special interest money that would change how they vote so that they can remain people first, mostly in the context of a big group I made for them, a big program that's free. And then I do private consulting work with a small handful.
And that's what does that entail? Because I know that I've heard the term, just lost it. Shoot, I literally just lost it. That's embarrassing. I'm going to blame that on long COVID.
Yeah.
I'm going to blame that on long COVID. Incubator.
Yes.
That's the word. Bam,
yeah.
Got it. An incubator program. Correct? Am I correct in that?
I stepped away from that term. When it was smaller, I would say it was more of that. I'd say its biggest purpose at this point is community. Incubator program, I think of something where you can have a little bit more direct, like one-on-one work with people. And I did that in the fall for free for a long time. As this started to grow, it really has become more about collaborative leadership and community. And what I mean by collaborative leadership is there's probably close to 120 different candidates in there now. I'd say at least 80 are still in active campaigns alongside a few dozen vetted influencers, organizers, folks from like Flair, which is a congressional lobby volunteer group that's amazing, podcasters, other kinds of influencers and amplifiers, so that we can move in step, so that when something happens, we can troll the incumbent if they're not doing a good job and amplify the person who's running against them and try to get articles of impeachment moved and try to, if somebody's doing something that's abusive or like when the Eric Swalwell stuff happened, so that we can move in step with all these different levers and hopefully get these leaders elected who are unbought, unafraid of speaking truth to power, and relentlessly people.
So you brought it up. I had a conversation yesterday with a group that I'm part of that just kind of helps strategically plan things, and nothing nefarious, but it's more along the lines of we should be talking about these kinds of things, and here's information about it. That kind of strict. And one of the things that we're talking about was kind of the manosphere, this red pill culture that's been so big over the last few years. But one of the women that was in the group mentioned the fact that this behavior by men, not all men, right? We have to put that in there, but this behavior by men, isn't a right or left issue. That it's across the board, that it's more about the system of patriarchy rather than like MAGA or progressive, that you find it regardless of whatever's at the end of somebody's name. One person even mentioned that she typically doesn't do male clients because what she found was they either wanted to sleep with her or they wanted her to be their mom. They wanted her to be their mom. And she was really surprised by the fact that so many quote unquote progressive men were the ones that were like, by the end of the conversation, like asking her out and trying to, all that stuff. So I'm curious, you're in that world, you're a woman, you were actually, I won't say close to Eric Swalwell, but you were definitely adjacent. I mean,
he had his phone number for months, met him a few times. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious your thoughts on that, maybe your experiences. And you know what? You can tell me to jump off a cliff anytime you want to. We don't have to go
No,
further
and
than
I'm
you want
comfortable.
to.
I know my own
Yeah.
limits. You're good. So with Eric specifically, I'll start there, but then I'll go to the more general picture. Eric actually was never inappropriate towards me whatsoever. I was actually impressed when I first connected with him that he was a public figure, an elected member of Congress, human, and yet like very boundaried and appropriate. So I mentioned his wife or kids are the same age, that type of thing. And yet when the things came out, there were still some pieces that I could put together that I was like, but my contact with him was limited enough and it was related enough to this work that I do that it actually, I didn't have that experience. Let's address the first part. My experience with the progressive space is not what you described. However, there is, and it might be just a matter of definition, but my experience with the establishment right and left has a high degree of what I would call emotional immaturity, black and white thinking, that type of thing. And in that place, that can arise. In the world I am in primarily with progressive candidates and creators, there's a high degree of nuanced thinking, especially these candidates. And they're out in their communities all the time. They are able to have, really do an incredible job with active listening skills and hearing people and responding in a way that truly validates somebody's frustration, emotion, makes people feel seen, and yet finds the common ground without backing down on things like basic human rights. Or when somebody has a concern about like, how would we pay for universal health care? And they seem to be against it, even though it's something that would benefit all of us. They have a really great way of how they respond where the person feels deeply seen and heard. So in my experience, being in the progressive space has not 100%, but mostly been an ability to see nuance and come at things, approach things with responsiveness instead of reactiveness.
That's interesting. That's interesting, especially what you said about the black and white thinking, the very binary thinking of the establishment versus the more nuanced, non-binary thinking of these grassroots candidates that are coming up. You're close to this. Why do you think that is? Like, what creates, is it just power? Is it money?
So I'm going to take this in a couple different directions. And to be clear, as I'm sitting here thinking, there are plenty of examples of people in the progressive space that are reactive and black and white in their thinking. But my day to day is mostly with this group of candidates, and that has not been the case by and large. Most of them are under the age of 40. I'm about to turn 40. I believe that those of us who graduated college around the time the recession happened, like myself, and some of the younger generations, Gen Z and millennials in leadership, what Amanda Littman, who runs an organization called Run for Something, she would call that collectively next gen. We, I think, are very good at being flexible and nimble, and we don't make decisions from fear. We make decisions from what I would call sovereignty. We're not afraid of losing a job that we've had for 10 years if we see something that's wrong, because we started out without that illusion of job safety existing, right? We're used to having to figure it out, and we know that we can. I think there's also a higher degree of like people who have explored therapy and learned how to set boundaries and things like that in our generation. And we also have the lived experience of crippling student loans and, once in a lifetime events happening every few years. And different generations have had different versions of that. There's no doubt, but it seems to be speeding.
Yeah, not at this pace.
Yeah, not at this pace. And we all have, kids and that kind of thing, but not all of us, but a lot of us. But I think that part of it is this is a group of people who are doing something that's historically been impossible, to run for office without accepting these types of campaign funds. So there are people who inherently have grit. They have a why. They have like a lived experience that was painful enough to say, full stop, we can do better. And I will be the one to step up to do that if I need to. And then I think there's just a community aspect to it too, as, this program, which I put in air quotes because I think it's more of a community than anything else. It will never be something where I'm like assessing a win rate. It's not that type of thing. I know a lot of things in politics are that. My goal is more to have a safe place to land, right? Like I think a lot of these folks would have quit from burnout and isolation and all these things if they didn't have community. And Citizens Impeachment has done a really great job building that kind of a community as well. But like I have resources, I have pre-recorded things, I have a bunch of contacts for a bunch of other PACs and orgs and endorsement folks that I've gotten to know. And beyond that, it's a community. And when things happen, we can support each other. We can move in step. We can help amplify each other. But there's something deeply collaborative about how I think from an age perspective, folks my age and younger operate. That's a little bit different than older generations. And combined with the like real, raw, hard life experience aspect of how these candidates got into this work, like you're very motivated to work together in community.
Wonder I wonder because, you think about, you use the word collaborative, right? And obviously the people at top, like these establishment Democrats, right? Let's talk about them for a moment.
Yeah, sure.
Let's just set
Not
MAGA aside.
collaborative.
Yeah. Let's set MAGA aside and we'll talk about establishment Democrats.
Yeah.
Because let's be fair.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of establishment Democrats now, don't hear me say both sides. This is not a both sidism or whatever. However, these establishment Democrats are part of the problem. I won't call them the opposite side of the same coin, but it's like, maybe it's just a slightly different coin. Maybe instead of a quarter, it's a dime, right? But it's still, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Analogy. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm curious your thoughts because you use that word collaborative. Now, when I think about collaborative, right, it's, let's say you and I and Luke, who's the main creator of Reasoned
Yeah.
Reality, and we're sitting down and we're throwing out ideas or whatever and pitching stuff, and then we land on a thing together. And then we all go in on it and collaborate, like literally, like if we are posting something and everybody's, collaborating with it. And, there's a give and take and ideas bounce around stuff. But what it seems like from the outside looking in, that's not what their idea of collaboration is. Their idea of collaboration is almost the exact same as, say, like MAGA. It's very power driven, very ego driven, get in line, dissent will not be tolerated, right? So it's not actual. Am I
Yeah,
hit?
you're
Is
spot
that?
on. You're spot on. Yeah. So, I have a really good friend. His name's David Middich, and he volunteers with an organization called Flare. He is a social worker turned full-time volunteer impeachment lobbyist. So over the course of the last year, he has driven down from Philadelphia and spent a few days a week on the Hill, which for anyone who's not like in DC lingo, that just means like at the Capitol, talking to people. Anyone can go to the Capitol anytime. I've done it several lobbying days with them and talk to reps and staffers. It's usually staffers. So he has formed real relationships over time with a lot of people that work for our representatives. He mostly works with folks who are in the House, not the Senate. He calls the House the Wild, Wild West. But anyway, what he's learned is that it's more than that. Yes, it might seem like power on the outside, but I would call it fragility and fear-based thinking on the inside. It's this clutching to like, oh no, what's the public going to think? Oh no, what if we fail again? Oh no, what if we don't have the majority? But then by taking the less bold move, you're actually more likely to lose the majority, right? It's like, don't ruffle feathers, don't mess with the status quo, which I think it's, a few different things. One is AIPAC being bought by Israel, being bought by corporations, being bought by things that deeply affect how people vote and what they say and what they do, who are elected officials. They literally cannot represent their constituents because of how money in politics works right now. And the other factor is this, this is where I geek out on being a quote, trauma-informed political consultant or whatever you want to call it, but the inner stuff, the quiet inner stuff that secretly, quietly motivates every decision that any person makes, whether that's like the belief that we're not enough. That's a big one. A lot of us carry that. We're making decisions based on like wanting to feel seen or heard or understood or whatever. That type of, emotional immaturity or whatever you want to call it, lack of having looked at your own stuff leads to a lot of black and white thinking and reactivity and fear-based thinking. Versus when someone has been able to self-reflect in any way, shape, or form, or that often comes from a rupture after like a really hard life experience, which is a very common thing among these candidates, you become more humble. You become more able to see people in their humanity, you become more able to listen, you become more able to see that things like the pro-choice, pro-life debate is not a two-sided thing. It is very nuanced. There's ways to have that conversation that actually move the needle on improving health for everybody. It's a conversation I have all the time, but like you're able to work together to get to the heart of what the actual problem is, to find real solutions to real problems instead of reacting to our own fears or opinions or need to win or need to be seen or heard.
That's interesting. Let's park there for a second, if you're okay with that, because I feel like everybody that knows, listens or follows my stuff knows that I'm a progressive pastor, that I'm still in it, and you're not quiet. Well, like within the three of us, right? I don't know, agnostic, just whatever, and
I know that I don't know. Yeah, I
right,
guess you can call it agnostic. Yeah.
yeah.
I've never liked to define it. I always say spirituality for me is deeply rooted in curiosity and humility. And the minute that I think I know or have a like that to me brings us back into that kind of like egoic, rigid mindset, which I think is exactly what Jesus and the Buddha and others were teaching us to transcend. So yeah, agnostic is probably a good word for it.
And
Anyway,
then
continue.
and then Luke is
All
atheist.
atheists.
Yeah. But we all work well together because there is no ego, right? Like I don't need either of you to be or not be anything. But that goes for Luke as well. It goes for you. And I think back on my life, and 10 years ago, that probably would not have been the case. Maybe I've never been a jerk about that kind of stuff. So I would have been able to operate well within this. However, there's the asterisk. In my mind, I would have been like plotting.
I know the type. I'm surrounded by it where I live.
Try to slide a little bit of Jesus, slide a little bit of the gospel in there because I'm trying to save you, right? And I'm curious about the people that you work with, like because there are people all over the spectrum. Like I know here in Florida, there's a lot of really good grassroots candidates that are coming up, and some of them are people of faith, and some of them are not. But they all operate almost the exact same way, right? Rather than, well, at the time of this recording, this weekend we've got this stupid on Sunday, this Freedom 250, this Jubilee thing. Celebrate rededicating the country to one nation under God, which is absolutely disgusting. I'm 100% opposed to this. You know what? Hold on just one second. Let me put my pastor hat on. Biblical Jubilee is about economic redistribution. It is about resetting everything so that there is no economic equality. That's what Jubilee is. And it was supposed to happen on the regular. That's what Jubilee means. So the fact that this group of MAGA Christians are setting up, who knows how many millions of dollars they're spending at the Capitol, bringing all these jackwagons in, it's going to be this feel good. I'm going to ease back because I'm going to say something, if I'm not careful, that will have to get bleeped.
I mean, does Luke care? Can we just have...
Oh, I don't know, but like what I was going to say was like...
we can collaborate on if that's allowed.
That's true.
This is our podcast, Joe.
But it's mind-blowing to me. Mind-blowing that they're going to have this massive celebration, this one big circle jerk of praise and worship, and they're calling it Jubilee while ignoring what Jubilee actually is, right? They want, and I posted this morning, MAGA wants the aesthetics of Jubilee without the economics of Jubilee. And that is the modern Christianity in a nutshell.
Why don't I read to you real quick the thing that I tagged you in? Let me screenshot it right before we got on this.
Okay.
Right before we got on this live. You probably didn't see it yet, right?
Have it.
Okay. I love that this is just a meandering conversation at this point. This is the best kind. Okay. I do a post, same post, about every 2 or 3 months. It's a combination of information that I learned from Colby Martin's book Unclobber about the 6 passages that have been weaponized against the LGBTQ plus community and what they likely meant in their original language and context. 1946, the movie, how the word homosexual wasn't in any Bible in any language before 1946. Aki Rogia is a great friend. Check it out.
Yeah, she's great.
She's great. This person said, respectfully, creating a God in your own image, that's what you're doing. This is to me. It's pride. This is not how any genuine theologian interprets scripture. You're wanting a God that fits into your Pink Pony Club lifestyle, which is always the song that I have. I have like a string version of Pink Pony Club whenever I do this post.
What a Pink Pony Club God.
You know, and you play that perverse song as if it's a worship anthem. I feel like I'm having a April a Joy moment here. This is very on brand for her. God won't be mocked. Good luck with that. To which I said, respectfully, I'm not a Christian, nor have I ever been. The Bible has zero authority in my life. I care deeply about humanity and marginalized communities, though, which might sound familiar.
Don't understand why that's the part people forget. They just conveniently forget. My gosh.
All right, let's talk about what you said a minute ago with like the candidates seem to all be the same. So I think that part of this ability to have more emotional nuance, etc., is like, first of all, it's the knowledge that you don't know, right? It's humility, whether that's in religion or agnosticism or policy or any of it. But there's this, we're all focused on the same end goal, which is human flourishing, putting people first. So it doesn't matter, I don't think, to any of us, whether it's coming through the lens of Jesus or just like, I didn't grow up with the Bible. Like, we went to church intermittently, and it was in one year and out the other. It was not reinforced at home in any way, shape, or form. But like people inherently like I believe in original goodness. And then we have traumas and things that happen to us and conditioned beliefs that is where we get wonky and end up having harmful things and behaviors and self-destructive behaviors as humans. But I believe in original goodness. Original sin was added later, as you know.
Later.
But I recently heard the term Christian atheist. Have you heard of this?
I have. I know some, yes.
So I would love to know what you interpret that as, but I didn't go into a deep dive. But my understanding is you don't necessarily believe in God, but you think Jesus was a worthwhile person to learn from and follow. Is that about what you would?
Pretty much.
So it's a spectrum. It's a spectrum. And like, it could be the Buddha. I truly believe that these are among the most highly conscious people that ever lived and that they taught the same thing, interpreted different ways by different cultures. And I think there's people alive today. I think we are experiencing the rising of what's called the Christ consciousness, where this coming out of like shame, fear, guilt-based dominant thinking is starting to dissolve. And we are more and more of the population is entering a place where we can think in a more nuanced, humble, not self-seeking way. And if the second coming of Christ has any meaning, it is something related to, in my opinion, this rising of the Christ consciousness.
It's so funny you say that. Number one, you sound like Richard Rohr.
I've read a lot of Richard Rohr.
Yeah, you sound exactly like Richard Rohr. Number two, so a few years ago, I did a deep dive, and we've talked about this on other stuff, but I did a deep dive into something called spiral dynamics. And it's just
Ken Wilber. Ken Wilber?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's just a way of recognizing inner things that exist within all of us. And it's just different language. I mean, Enneagram, or what's the one thing that you like to use, the levels?
Meta consciousness. Same thing with spiral dynamics.
So there's just, it's all different languages and stuff.
Survival-based thinking. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs is another one that's very congruent.
Right. And it's funny you bring that up because spiral dynamics was born out of the fact that they were seeing some research. This is according to them, that there was a consciousness that moved beyond that hierarchy of needs. And then that's when, they came up with this idea. But what I found fascinating in that was that you can see these moments in human history where collectively humanity just kind of moved forward. There's almost like, there might be catalysts or whatever, but just for whatever reason, humanity just decided we're gonna make this leap. And one of the best examples of that they gave was chattel slavery, right? Like slavery was fine forever. And then just all of a sudden, it wasn't. One of the things that they talked about, and maybe this is a Richard Rohr thing too, I can't remember, doesn't matter. But one of the things that I was reading during that time period that really like altered how I thought about stuff was the fact that when those moments happen, and I think that we're in another one of those moments, like that's why I'm talking about it.
Yeah.
I feel like we're in another one of those moments where a certain percentage of humanity is collectively moving forward. Now, for those of us within the church or whatever, you might call it spirit. Doesn't matter to me what it's being called.
And we're not meant to know, I don't think.
Yeah.
Right? I really define, and that's a Richard Rohr thing too. How can we possibly expect human language
to really care? Yeah, at the end of the day, I don't really care. You know what I mean? But there's this movement forward, and once that hits a certain spot, once it hit a certain percentage of people in the populace, things begin to tip over into that. Where the tumultuousness comes, the tension, is because there's always a group of people that are invested in keeping things as is. Their power and their money are tied to the status quo. And I feel like that's what we're in right now. This past decade, that's the actual rub. In my opinion, behind the scenes, take policy out of it, all the stuff. You're looking at a group of people that want to pull things forward. Universal health care, right? That's pulling things forward. Free or very cheap childcare, access to education, free education. Why do we not have free education? Why are we spending $1 billion a day on another forever war that's not making any difference? It's making my life incredibly harder, but we won't pay for free education. You know what I mean? Because one group wants to pull humanity forward and one group wants to take us backwards because their money and their power are tied to it.
I'm going to drop a statistic real quick that I learned from a candidate on an interview I did last week. And this is why I love interviewing these candidates, because they're actually genuinely geek out on policy. Like before I met these folks, I remember it was like this aha moment to be like, wow, we could have elected officials that actually give a shit and like actually delight in writing policy that helps people, right? But this one candidate, his name is Jason Poulos, he's running in Massachusetts. I don't know which district, and that's okay. But anyway, he said that the amount we spent already on this war. We could drop the age of Medicare to 35 and fund it for 7 years.
I wonder.
That was tangible in a way that was like,
that's crazy.
Yeah.
I wonder, and I bet if you just if you drop, like historically Medicaid, what are you, 65? You have to be 65
Right.
to get that automatically. What if it was just dropped to 50?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I wonder how long it would last then. That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. That's
the money exists for it, or it could be
reallocated.
Yeah. And we don't tax billionaires the way Europe does. My understanding is that if we even had billionaires pay what they owe, I wish I remembered where I saw this because I love to give sources. But between having people pay what they already owe and taxing the ultra wealthy the way some of our European
Mamdani.
Right. Like it would fund these things effortlessly. It exists. Mamdani.
He's showing it.
What's up? He's doing it. Yeah.
He's showing it.
Taxed second residences, not people's primary residences that are over $5 million. Reallocation.
Didn't cut.
Not punishing somebody for their day-to-day, residence.
And didn't cut any vital programming because that was what they said he was going to have to do. And they didn't cut anything and still got rid of that deficit. The dude has not been in office half a year, maybe half a year. No.
Yeah.
It's got to be like 120 something days, right? Because they just did the first 100 days. Yeah. So not even half a year yet. And he's flipped that deficit around already with these progressive policies.
I saw a post pop up yesterday. Sorry, I know you're about to say something, but this is good. Is that okay?
Yeah, dude, I was done.
Okay. It was Mike Johannsen on Fox News saying something like, well, there's all these little Mamdanis popping up all over the country. And I sent it to Citizens Impeachment, which is like the other group that's made this big coalition of candidates. We were briefly combined in the fall and we just had like different focuses, but we still talk all the time. And we were like high-fiving behind the scenes. Like,
yeah,
yes, there are. There's way more of them and they're way more powerful than you think too. And it's okay that you have not figured that out yet.
That's awesome. I love that so much. Yeah. One of the things this week I interviewed, it's going to be next week's episode at the time of this recording. Qasim Rashid.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's awesome. But he was talking about Mamdani and damn it, Luke, you're going to have to edit this part out. I don't know what my deal is.
What would Qasim say about Mamdani?
He had lots to say. And I'm trying to remember what it was because it was so good.
He does a lot of like good quippy things on Instagram where he'll write, it's probably screenshotted from threads, but like he'll write like MAGA things, but Mamdani did.
That's it. Thank you. All right, here we go. So this week, at the time of this recording this week, it'll be next week's episode. That will make sense to anybody who's listening to this. It was an old episode. I think this comes out. I interviewed Qasim Rashid, and one of the things that he said that really stuck out to me, and one of the things that like for him made Mamdani different was because he was a councilman before he was anything. And what he did was he looked at all of the people around him and he found the places where people voted most for Trump, for MAGA. And he showed up in those spaces and just started having conversations. And what he found was the things that they want are the things that we all want. They just, if you don't attach certain phrases to it or labels to it, right? That's where the trip up. So he built his platform on the things that everybody wants, which is like healthcare. We all want healthcare.
Banning stock trading in Congress.
Yes.
Like abusive leaders. There's this thing called the 80% bill. There's a content creator and a comedian named Jack Ferguson who has a European girlfriend. And I didn't know the origin of this until more recently, but she had like kind of like jokingly said to him, like, I don't know that I can really stay in this country. Like, beyond a lot to fix. And then he had this idea, and anyone can write legislation. He wrote a bill as a comedian and a content creator is 21 things that 80% of Americans agree on. And he has a whole website. He's made a bunch of content about it. Candidates can take his pledge. So like I've introduced him to all my candidates. Like I have a bunch of people who have these different pledges that they can take, but the legislation's been written. It's things like overturning Citizens United, which is why our campaign financing is so screwed up. It's things like banning stock trading in Congress. hypothetically speaking, if we were to get a block of these leaders elected at once, even if we had like 5, which I think that's a pretty conservative number between, citizens impeachment has like 150 candidates. I have like 120. They're not a complete overlap. So let's say there's 170 to 200 of these folks that are running on very similar platforms. I still find people that weren't on my radar yet because there's 435 members of the House and 100 members of the Senate, multiple people sometimes running in these races. But let's say we get 5 or 10 or 15 of these folks across the board. The energy of this type of movement is magnetic, and on a sort of silly but also real level, it creates a sense of social safety. I think there are people in Congress right now who are afraid to be as bold as this group is. Or it seems uncool to be the one that's kind of doing something differently now, but this group there's a magnetism to it, and that creates movement. And I truly believe that having a block of these folks could create a ripple effect among existing members of Congress who are maybe having some of these thoughts but are not confident enough to speak
I
up.
totally agree. I think, since we've talked about Mamdani, I think that his success is going to give more and more people permission to be able to go out there and do that stuff, right? Like we have the AOCs and the Bernie Sanders, but man, Mamdani, and I'm not saying that Bernie Sanders and AOC are not on the ground. I'm not saying that. However, Mamdani's legislation, it's immediate. Like it happens right then, right? They have to go through all the machinations and all of the hoops and all the things that, AOCs and the Bernie Sanders have to do. They have to do all of that stuff. So it takes much longer. Mamdani's impact is immediate, and you can see the positive impact of what these actual progressive policies do for all of us. And I think that's going to give more and more people permission to actually be like, oh, wait, if we do stand on this platform, it benefits everybody. Everybody. It lifts everybody. MAGA, progressive, in between centrist, everybody benefits from these things. And I think that hopefully my hope is that you'll see more and more people actually have the guts, the courage to stand up and be like, well, you've got a ton of them.
I got a ton of them. Yeah, we got plenty of them. And I already have 2028 candidates in my chat. I have people who are going to run in 2028, and they're starting to lay the groundwork and learn from these folks.
That's sweet.
So, I was on Arrington Gavin's show a couple of weeks ago, and one of his questions is, how would you define a progressive platform? He was like, I don't personally identify with a party because I'm frustrated with both sides. And I said, I get it. I am deeply critical of the Democratic Party. It is not a both sides of the same coin thing, just like you said earlier. But I said, I personally would describe a progressive platform as non-partisan. It is pragmatic. It is things that help all people alongside the fierce belief that human rights are not a zero-sum game.
I wonder how you would just create, I know right now with the way that things are set up, it's near impossible, but it would be great to have like a actual progressive party.
I think that I don't, people will say, oh, the two-party system. I actually don't think that's the problem. And a lot of people will disagree with me on that. It's the level of consciousness of the bulk of the people in it. That's the problem. Because you could have 3 parties and all of a sudden you could have a party win that represents only like a third of the people because the other 2 split the votes on, similar things, which would not be good either. The way I understand it, I learned this from Hunter Miranda, who has a degree in policy from the Berkeley Institute of Policy. Like, I didn't know that was a thing you could major in college, but he was explaining to me that unless we did our entire system differently with how individual areas are represented, we couldn't have more parties at the national level. But I do think the way MAGA and the Tea Party movement came in and took over the Republican Party, David Mittich, my friend from Flair, who I mentioned earlier, we like to think that this progressive movement that we are a piece of, there's a lot of people that are involved in this, Mamdani being one of the probably most known names, but we are taking over the Democratic Party. We are showing up as the adults in the room with the ideas and the courage and the boldness and the ability to listen, the ability to respond, and it's working.
Let me ask you this, because you said it's working. I agree. I think that come November, that these redistrict maps, what they're trying to do, Trump threatening to have like election armies or whatever they're called now in every state or whatever. I don't think that they can rig it deep enough.
I don't think they can either.
As a matter of fact, I think they're even hurting themselves. I think their racism is going to cost them, because now, like, I know here in the state of Florida, I've got friends that are in politics. Some of these groups that, if you're running a campaign, you hire them to do all of your PR and all of that stuff and like advise you on stuff. I've got a friend that's in one of those. And behind the scenes, some of our state Republicans are terrified now. They're really upset. They didn't want to do this simply because plus 20 districts are now plus 5 districts. And with Trump so far underwater, their once secure position is now easily flipped. So they're all worried. So I think racism is going to cost them. So my biggest fear is not that there's going to be this massive historic blue wave and we're going to take back the House and the Senate. My biggest fear, and I said this to Qasim too, and so I'm interested to see what you say. My biggest fear is that the establishment, the Democratic establishment, won't do what they need to do. They'll do what they always do, which is capitulate, which is, well, the country needs to move forward. We need to heal. And there can never be healing if you don't name the wound, right? If there's never responsibility taken, if there's never accountability given, you can't heal. That's my biggest fear.
So I think that's going to happen. Also, I think
That's what he said.
Yeah, I do think that's what's going to happen. But what's also going to happen, hopefully, maybe not this go around, but within the next few years, is this movement has enough momentum and energy that like no one's listening to that anyway. And like, I almost see this as something that like builds enough of its own power that the DNC has no choice but to catch up.
That's my hope too. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes.
And it's decentralized, right? It's not any one person. I would think of Mamdani as a person who's helped carve this out, and Dr. Abdul Al-Sayed, who's running for Senate in Michigan, as a person who helped carve this out, and certainly Citizens Impeachment's work, which is a nonpartisan organization. However, it is deeply rooted in anti-fraud, anti-abuse, impeachment of the president, following the Constitution. It mostly attracts progressive candidates. But the results are so clear.
This runs so deep.
Yeah.
As you're talking, I am currently reading, now forgive me, you'll know how to pronounce his last name. I always forget. Andrew
Seidel.
Seidel.
Yeah, I called him Andrew Seidel for the longest time, and I did a conference with him. It's his organization's conference, but we were on a panel together a few weeks ago, and after I heard him introduce himself, I was like, oh shoot, okay, now I know.
So Seidel.
Andrew Seidel, the founding myth.
Right. Yes. So that's what I'm currently reading, is the founding myth. I'm about halfway through it. And I'm 100% on board with everything that you just said, and it gives me so much hope. However, it does run so deep, right? Like there's so many things that we have to untangle. It's a lot like you just brought this up a minute ago about that 1946 post that we collabed on, that you do every several months, whatever it is. The hard part of actually getting to the truth is uncovering the layers of myth that have been seen as truth for so long. Like, dude, I am in my late 40s. I didn't know that George Washington didn't actually pray at Valley Forge. That's a founding myth. That never happened. And then that founding myth was put into school textbooks so that all of the school children of that time knew these founding myths about George Washington. Like, we all know that the lying of the chopping, now that's not a true story. The Valley Forge, I thought, was a founding myth. Just like the 1946 thing with the language of being, homosexuality been inserted, you got to undo all of these things. You got to pull apart all of these myths that have been taught as truth, as bedrock truth. And so the hard part in my experience has been like, well, you're just making stuff up. And I was just like, and I think it was your post. Somebody said that you're just making stuff up. And I'm like, no, we're not. We're showing you that all of this was made up. Like, this is all just made up. And I think that's one of the really hard parts for people, is because there's so much myth layered on top of all of this that we have to do the work of untangling all of it just to get to the truth. Where for them, and I know it's not that binary, but for them, this is just truth. And so it's easy, right? This is easy. But over here, we have to like undo all of this stuff. And I'm just thinking about all the things that you just said. And it's just like, it's for people, just ordinary people. There's so much layered on top of what you just said to get to that point, for them to be able to even hear what you just said, even though
There's two directions I want to go with this. One is I'm going to talk about EMDR, which is like a therapeutic modality. And the other is I want to talk about, I'm going to start actually on the other point, which is ironically, what I think Jesus and the Buddha and others were teaching was to transcend our blindness. So fundamentalist religion traps people in their own blindness and in their own rigid thinking, because sin is translated from hamartia, about 9 or so words translated to sin in the Bible with a variety of meanings.
I did a Substack thing on hamartia and then Aramaic and what it actually means and stuff. It's very nuanced and like, oh, that feels so much better. That makes so much more sense.
like we all have inherent blind spots. Is that how you
Yeah.
would? And we
Yeah,
tend,
yeah. It's just it's literally living out of alignment with who you
yes,
actually
who
are
you
and
are.
missing the path.
Which the conformity and the rigidity of high demand religion across the board of any type of religion causes us to live out of alignment, right?
Yes.
And as we strip back our blind spots, which is, people don't always have the ability to go through a healing journey, either because they have no rupture moment where they wake up, or, to some degree, I think of being able to go through that kind of process as somewhat of a privilege, because you have to be able to come out of
Yeah.
survival mode long enough.
Right now, how can somebody stop to do that when you have to work so much just to make it meet? I think it's by design. Anyway, go ahead. I don't
Repent, mistranslated from metanoia, which had no root in shame or fear or punishment. It meant a radical inner transformation, which happens over time. I think it is completely in alignment with our modern understanding of trauma-informed healing. And it, whether you're talking about spiral dynamics or the map of consciousness, like you can come out of these survival mode states where you're unconsciously operating through the lens of shame, fear, guilt, scarcity, etc. And now as humans, you don't graduate to a different level of consciousness and stay there, but you can do a degree of inner work that helps you heal. And then when you have these big ruptures in your life, these big hardships, you're approaching it more consciously. You're approaching it with more tools. And when you're seeing, like when I had a hard week this week, I was processing a lot of grief about some things in my life, but it was not unconscious. I was not numbing. I was letting myself feel it and deal with it and still going about my life and doing some things that would relax me a little bit, like watching TV. But it wasn't unconscious. Me 15 years ago would have took that as a sign to like book myself super like busy or maybe like go out with friends and drink or I don't know, something. But it wasn't unconscious. The problem isn't so much the scarcity feeling or the difficult emotions at all. It's the self-awareness behind it, or lack thereof, I should say. Before I switch into EMDR, did you want to say anything about the
I agree.
Yeah. And hell isn't biblical. Mistranslation of 4 words. I have never believed in hell. So when people hear where I live in the Bible Belt in a mega university town, like I have gotten told I'm going to hell more times than I can count. And like, I don't know what to do with me because I'm like, I, I don't believe in hell. Like I genuinely just have never
Are we
believed.
not there now? Like
But
you're doing a
now
good
I'll
job
be
of
like,
seeing it.
either did early Christians.
Before you get to the EMDR,
Yeah.
I have said this a few times. I think it's going to be a mantra of mine for the next little bit. I say this. This is where I put on a pastor hat. I say this as a Christian pastor. I'm so tired of hearing about Christianity. I'm exhausted. And I can't imagine how somebody who's not inside of it feels.
I
So
feel seen.
I'm so exhausted by it. It's just like, shut up. Shut up. Nobody cares. If you want to live by that, live by that. Please live by that. But my God in heaven, stop forcing it down to everybody. Stop forcing it down my throat. I'm sick of it. And my job is literally to study this thing, to talk about it, to walk through it, whatever, create community. And it's just like, oh, it's just so exhausting. I long for the day when politics is about politics, which is about, more than just politics.
No,
But just like,
policy that
God.
helps people, right? Policy that actually
Yes.
delivers for people. That's what I long for.
Anyway, your EMDR.
Okay, EMDR. So EMDR is a type of trauma therapy that I have done. It was life-changing for me, but it is, I hope I'm saying this correctly because I'm not I joke that I'm trauma-informed, whatever. I'm not a licensed mental health professional. I am a dentist by profession. I am a retired dentist, but not a mental health professional. So EMDR is rooted in when we have a traumatic memory, it lodges in our entire physiology, right? So that we get these triggers and we might not even understand why something in our environment is deeply triggering to us. But EMDR uses bilateral stimulation of our brain. I did the eye movement one. There's other ways to do it, but it replicates the way our brain functions during REM sleep. And it allows us to reprocess that experience and it takes the emotional charge out of it so that we can be around these triggering things again and not get triggered, which is remarkable. One of the things I remember learning early in EMDR was we generally have 3 to 4 core beliefs that have formed around which all of our triggers and traumatic experience to have cluster. So, a big one for a lot of people that I had is like, I'm inherently broken, or I'm not enough, or I'm trying to think of the other ones. If you can Google a sheet of like EMDR negative cognitions and what the opposite of that would be. But the cool thing is that like you start with the one that feels the most true, and you work through various like memories you have associated with that. And it's like a house of cards thing, because as soon as you knock out the one belief, it actually knocks out a bunch of traumatic experiences. And then the next belief and a bunch of traumatic memories. And then you get to the point where whatever is left, none of us ever wipe ourselves of all of these things, of course, but it's minimal, it's manageable, it can be handled in smaller doses as these things arise. But with undoing illusions or beliefs, I suspect it functions similarly, where there's these times where you have this these big moments and a bunch of things kind of collapse at once, and then it's slower for a bit and slower for a bit and slower for a bit. And then people have a bunch of those illusions collapse at once again. I don't know.
Interesting. That's interesting. I wish for so many people sitting in these fundamentalist high control spaces to have that. So many people in my comments need to have that. Or even just
never will.
Very true. But even just the awareness, I think like you said, I don't know how realistic that is for a lot of people, but even just the awareness that that's a thing, maybe not even the therapy, like, okay, understanding that the therapy's there, but just being aware of the fact of what you just talked about, all of these trauma responses that they're having, I'm trying to decide, I want to honor your time, but I've got so much more to talk about because you kind of straddle a couple of worlds. Like, so you've got like a foot in politics. You kind of got a foot into some of the stuff that you just kind of talked to, I don't even know how to describe it. You've got a whole website on.
Yeah, my blog is mostly about like our inner how our world like affects our outer world. Yeah, which I haven't in ages, but yeah.
Yeah, so you're straddling into that. You also kind of have a foot in like some more progressive and even progressive Christian spaces where like you're doing a thing at Wild Goose Festival again this year, like you did last year. You're doing something different than this year, but you're doing it again. And so you kind of straddle the fence of a couple of different worlds, and not like you just said, not growing up in a high control or fundamentalist faith system and kind of just observing from the outside. I feel like a lot of what's happening now with MAGA is all identity based.
Yeah.
It's all community, I think. And Lucas Bean, who's on Instagram.
We did a call together. I was out in California. We tried to get together a few weeks ago. It didn't work out. Anyway, he's wonderful.
He does a great job of, in just a few moments, kind of outlining these things in a way that helps understand. And I think for a lot of people, they have been so invested in this for the past decade that now that we are where we are, right? Like, because Trump has not done anything that he talked about, right? Like at all. As a matter of fact, he's gone the opposite direction because nothing he's doing is technically America first. I'm not going to be the guy to get you in forever wars. We're in one, right? I'm going to bring down the prices of groceries. Dude, inflation I saw this morning, grocery prices are the highest this month. This month is the highest they've been in 4 years. So we're talking like pandemic, worldwide emergency level prices where there should be no reason for that. So, but they are so invested, their identity, their belonging, their community is so invested in this thing for the past 10 years. Now to turn back on that is too much for some people because they would have to admit, all of this was wrong. It was all a mistake, everything. And for some people, that is too much for them to handle. And so I'm curious from your perspective, right, of kind of straddling the fence in all of those different worlds, like how do we move past this? How do we help people move forward, move beyond this? Because we're going to have to figure it out, right? Like you can't, I think there are some people that need to go to prison.
For sure.
Yeah, there are some people that need to go to prison. They need to be tried for sedition. And go to prison for the rest of their life. And I can name them off because they're my wish list.
Is there what?
It's my wish list. Like if I'm praying for that.
Yeah.
However, there's a lot of people, just regular people, that kind of bought it, right? And I get it. I want them to pay too. Like on one hand. On the other hand, it's just like, Is that realistic? Is that even strategic? If we're trying to recreate something new, if we're trying to build something new, do we just repeat does that make sense? I
It does.
understand I understand that it's nuance. It's not this or that, because I also I want them to pay. Did you ever see Inglourious Bastards?
No, but that's been brought up a couple times recently, actually. So maybe I need to.
Because Brad Pitt's character, the groups that's actually called the Bastards, they mark their victims. They mark the Nazis that they let go with a huge swastika. They carve a swastika in their forehead so that they can never be unbranded, so that everybody going forward knows they were a Nazi. I want that.
Yeah.
I don't mean like carving something in their head, but I do want that. Like a part of me wants that. If you were MAGA, you should never be able to take that red hat off. You should always have to wear that, always be shamed, right? Part of me wants that. The other side of me says, that's not realistic. That's not going to lead to healing for anybody. However, we didn't deal with the Confederacy like we should have, right? We need to deal with the Confederacy like we should now, right? So I understand it's like this tension.
So let's go back to emotional
Sorry.
maturity. No, I get it. Do you know who Carter Brown is? She's publicly deconstructing, and she's gotten a lot of pushback.
Yeah, I'm going to be interviewing her too.
Amazing. So I've connected with her, done a couple calls, but you know, when I reach out to her, I'm selective about who I befriend who's maybe going through that process, because I know some of it's going to just be too exhausting for me. But I knew with her it was going to be like an additive friendship. And she's willing to do the work. She's willing to hear feedback. She's willing to see blind spots. She immediately asked to be connected to any Black candidates that I knew, because she's trying to really understand the degree to which white supremacy underpins all of this in our country. But I think when we have done some degree of our own healing work, we have capacity, but we also have the ability to hold boundaries, which allows us to create that sort of safe place for people to land, but also simultaneously know when we need a break or when we need to say something to that person as they're deconstructing their political and religious beliefs. Like, I hear you, and this is what people actually hear when you say that. And these are the groups of people that's harmed. And I want to continue this process or this friendship with you. However, I need to pause until this is better understood. Something like that. And I don't think it takes this huge number of us who are able to do that. And some people are doing it publicly where they have audiences, and that helps more people at once or whatever. But I do think, circling back to Jesus, who I guess I follow as a non-Christian in some regard, like when we can approach things with healthy boundaries and our own sovereignty, but also be curious and loving, I think we have to hold those boundaries. We have to hold people accountable. We have to help them see what they're afraid to see of how they've inadvertently caused harm. But I think that's at least part of how we reckon with it.
It is interesting that you brought that up. And when you said that, there was a story that popped into my mind, because I think that one of the great tragedies of the American church is that it over spiritualizes the teachings of Jesus. We miss a lot when we do that. I think we miss the bulk when we do that. But there's this story where he's called a Roman soldier, but he's like in charge of a garrison. So he is a leader in the empire. Not only is he an oppressor, he is like one of the big ones, right? Mm-hmm. And he comes to him asking for Jesus's help. And I've never known what to do with this, because Jesus looks at this oppressor and is taken aback and says, I have yet to see faith like that anywhere else in Israel, in all of Israel. And he said that to an oppressor, right? So I don't know what to do with that, other than the fact that Jesus was just like, he didn't think black and white. Categories that we stand on, even ones like that, right? Like this guy's leads a garrison of soldiers for this oppressive regime. And Jesus says, I've not seen faith like this here. That's, you know what I mean?
Think on what that could have meant. Because I don't think when people are operating from a place of oppression, they're in any place of legitimate.
No, I don't either. No, I totally agree. And I don't know that that would be the point of what he was saying, because obviously, he was murdered by an oppressive regime, knew it was coming, knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing. When he went and cleared that temple and challenged the economic system of the temple that was tied to the politics, that was tied to Rome, because the temple priests had negotiated their power with Rome. So when he challenged that economic system, he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
So I obviously don't think that, he's endorsing any kind of oppressive regime or anybody within that. But I think it's somehow it's tied to what you just said about the both and, right? And I think Carter's a perfect example of that because that is somebody that's willing to do the work, right? They're not just, it's not just words. They are willing to do the work. They are willing to own it up. And I just don't understand how they're doing that publicly. I don't know that I would have been able to do that. I'm thankful that my deconstruction didn't include MAGA because I've never voted MAGA, never have Trump. I was a never Trumper from the beginning. Even when I was still conservative, I was loudly anti-Trump. But I think it's somehow tied to what you just said.
Yeah. And also, this is funny because I remember us talking about this at the end of the podcast we did together almost a year ago when you said, this sounds like it's something that like would be super hard for most people to do, right? Be this like bridge building person. I firmly believe that most people are not meant to be bridge builders, and that is okay. Like, that is okay. We all have our lanes. We all have our seasons. I could not have been the one doing this work during COVID. I had not worked through enough of my own stuff. And taking the time to deeply take care of ourselves in seasons of our life, well, really all the time, because I think that's how we stay able to function best. But there are these seasons I've had to deeply hunker down and take care of myself. And that's allowed me to move the way I do now. And if you are that now, it is okay to not be the person trying to have these conversations and hold this kind of space.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, I think that there are just certain groups of people, unless you're just extraordinary, like it's just not and don't hear me as telling somebody what to do or not do. Because far be it for me to do that. But I feel like people that have, look at me. I literally have to wear visible cues so that people, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm aware of that so that people don't just like, that guy, that guy's got a red hat in his car, right? Like I have to wear these visible cues to make sure. So I have an amount of privilege that I can walk into any conversation and I can walk out unharmed because there's nothing you can say to me or about me that's going to harm me. Like, nobody's legislating me. No, about anything, right? So it's our responsibility. We've got to do that work. People that look and walk and have access like I do. And I can't expect other people to do that.
I do. I get more frustrated with people's lack of participation in this, the more privilege they have. And I've been in a couple situations recently where I've been talking to presumably straight white men who just seem like not like actively harmful and definitely not MAGA, but like also very unaware. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. Like, it is much safer for you and I to speak out right now than
Jen. Yeah, so many. Hey, we could fill another hour of this. But I want to honor your time. We've been talking for well over an hour now. But just, man, thank you so much, not only for being such a good person, but put yourself out there, being a good friend, being a good human, doing the work that you're doing. A lot of the work that you do is behind the scenes, and a lot of people don't see a lot of it and don't even know what's taking place. But man, for those listening, it's making a huge impact. It's good work. Like when I said this at our last No Kings, just as an encouragement to everybody. The vast majority of human history is unrecorded, right? Like we have these freedom movements, if that's what we're going to talk about. We have these freedom movements and you have these people that are at the front, right? Like Dr. King was at the front. Rosa Parks was at the front. I am doing this today, man. I am losing words like left and right. It doesn't matter. But you have these heads of these freedom movements and they're there for a reason.
Susan B. Anthony is a name that comes to mind, but there's a bunch of women who are super involved in the movement. Yeah.
Great. So you have these people and they're there for a reason. However, you have these vast unnamed heroes, right? That are no less. History just didn't write their name down. But those things would not have happened had those people not been doing the work that they did, right? And they didn't do it for the headlines. They didn't do it for the applause. They didn't do it for any awards or anything. They did it because it needed to be done and they could. And I think a lot of us, I think you're one of those kind of people. I think that you should get the headlines. I hope that some of this stuff does happen and you get it. You get a little, not that this is why you do it, right? But, get the pat on the back and get a little bit of recognition for all the hard work that you do. I think you deserve that. Regardless, I think that you're in that category of people that there's just shit that has to get done right now. And you stepped out of what you were because you knew you could help. And I hope that if people listening to this take anything away from that, it's just that ordinary, everyday people, you were a dentist right?
Yeah. And to be fair, I was in the process over many years of leaving dentistry to do high integrity marketing and business coaching or consulting. That was a through line of many, many, many years. And I had started my platform already. So a lot of these same skills that I teach candidates with like clarifying messaging and growing their socials faster and better, but not really being a content creator. It's a different kind of energy you're bringing to the table. I was already doing that with entrepreneurs. So it's not just like teeth politics, but,
Yeah.
but thank you. And quiet power behind the scenes, like, yes, I'm headlines and all that kind of thing. Like if and when those things happen, what's more meaningful to me is when somebody that I deeply respect, like I become one of their go-to people. I'm having a struggle. Like you are the first person that came to mind to work through this thing with. That's what feels most like validating to me.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. Friends, all of her stuff is going to be in the show notes. So if you're not following along with her stuff, I cannot encourage you enough to do that. I think that the appeal to this is like, if you're somebody of faith, if you're somebody that doesn't have a faith system, if you're involved with politics or interested in politics, if you're not interested in politics, there's just a little bit of something for everybody in the stuff that you do. So make sure that you go and follow along. Jen, I can't thank you enough. It was a lot of fun just sitting and talking because I just felt like
we were overdue.
Yeah, well, yes, we were overdue, but we were just having a conversation and it just happened to get recorded. So thanks for being awesome.
Love you, friend. Talk soon.
Yes, love you too. All right, friends, thanks for following along. I hope that wherever you are finding yourself today, that you're having the exact day that you need. And don't forget, you might be the only voice of reason that somebody hears today. So don't be afraid to use it. All right, everybody, till next time.